There is a strange faithfulness in your soul to the very things that wounded it. You return again and again to the memory of what broke you, as though your spirit believes that by holding the pain close enough, long enough, you might finally understand why it came. But understanding is not what you seek. What you seek is permission to stop carrying it. And that permission has always lived within you, waiting in the silence you have learned to fear. Let me speak of something you have always known, but were taught to call weakness. There is a room inside you where all the hurt gathers, not because you invited it, but because your soul, in its mercy, gave it shelter when the world told you to cast it out. You were young when you learned that pain unexpressed becomes pain preserved. You stored it carefully like fragile heirlooms, thinking one day you would know what to do with it. But the days became years, and the years became a life spent visiting that room, running your fingers over old wounds as though they were the only proof you ever lived fully. This is not remembering. This is a kind of worship. You bow before your pain as though it were a god, as though it alone holds the key to who you were meant to become. And in your faithfulness to suffering, you have forgotten that the soul does not ask you to serve what hurt it. It asks only that you stop pretending the hurt did not matter. There is a difference between honoring a wound and building an altar to it. One allows you to heal. The other demands you remain broken. Your mind pulls you back not because it loves the pain, but because it fears the emptiness that would remain if the pain were gone. You have worn your suffering so long, it has become a second skin. To remove it would be to stand naked before yourself, and that nakedness terrifies you more than the ache ever did, so you return. You touch the bruise to see if it still hurts. You rehearse the betrayal, the loss, the moment when everything changed. Not to release it, but to prove to yourself that it was real, that you were there, that something mattered enough to leave a scar. But scars are not meant to be reopened. They are meant to be testimony. Your soul does not need you to bleed again to remember what it survived. It needs you to stop testing the old wounds to see if they still have power over you. They do. They always will if you continue to give them your attention as though attention were love. Attention is not love. Love does not ask you to return to what diminished you. Love asks you to remember what remained when the hurt was done taking from you. There was a version of you that existed before the wound. Do you remember? Or has the pain become so loud that it drowned out the memory of who you were when you still believed the world was safe? That version of you is not lost. It is buried under layers of protection you built to ensure nothing would ever hurt you that way again. But protection, when held too long, becomes a prison. And you have been living inside the walls you built to keep danger out, not realizing you also kept yourself in. The mind is faithful to patterns. It knows the path back to pain because you have walked it so many times, the earth beneath your feet has turned to stone. It is easier to return to what you know, even if what you know is suffering, than to step into the wilderness of healing, where there are no maps, no guarantees, only the quiet voice of your soul saying you are allowed to let this go now. But you do not trust that voice. You have trusted the pain longer. The pain has been more consistent. The pain has never left you. And so you mistake its presence for loyalty, not realizing it is only the ghost of something that already ended. What you call loyalty to your pain is often just exhaustion. You are tired of carrying it, but you are more tired of imagining what your life would be without it. Who would you be if you were not the person this happened to? What would you think about if not the betrayal, the loss, the moment everything fell apart? Your identity has grown around your wound like a tree around a stone. The stone is part of the shape now. To remove the stone would mean reshaping yourself entirely. And that kind of transformation asks more of you than endurance ever did. Endurance is passive. Transformation is active. Endurance says, I will survive this. Transformation says, I will become something new because of this. And you have been surviving for so long, you have forgotten that survival was never meant to be the end of the story. It was only meant to be the beginning, the part where you prove to yourself you are stronger than what tried to destroy you. But strength is not found in how long you can carry a burden. Strength is found in knowing when to set it down. Your mind pulls you back because it is trying to protect you from a danger that no longer exists.
It remembers the pain, and in remembering, it sounds an alarm. It says, do not forget. Do not let your guard down. If you forget, it will happen again. But the mind does not understand that remembering and reliving are not the same. You can remember what hurt you without returning to it. You can honor what you survived without letting it define every moment that follows. The mind, in its vigilance, does not know the difference between caution and captivity, and so it keeps you circling the same memory, the same fear, the same unanswered question, believing it is keeping you safe when all it is doing is keeping you stuck. There is a part of you that believes if you think about the pain enough, you will finally solve it, as though suffering were a riddle with an answer hidden somewhere in its depths. But pain is not a puzzle. It is an experience. And experiences do not need to be solved. They need to be felt, acknowledged, and then released. You have been trying to think your way out of something that can only be felt your way through. And thinking, when done in circles, is just another way of avoiding the grief that waits beneath the surface. Grief is what happens when love has nowhere to go. You love something, someone, some version of your life, and it was taken from you, or it changed, or it never became what you needed it to be. And rather than grieve the loss, you replay it. You search for what you could have done differently, as though rewriting the past in your mind could change the present you are living in. But the past does not change. Only your relationship to it does. And that relationship will remain painful as long as you continue to visit it, expecting it to give you something it was never designed to offer. Closure that comes from outside yourself. Closure is not something someone else gives you. It is not found in an apology you never received, an explanation that never came, or a chance to say the words you have been holding in your chest like stones. Closure is a choice. It is the moment you stop
waiting for the past to make sense and start building a life that does not require it to. It is the moment you realize the person you were waiting to hear from, the answer you were waiting to receive, will never arrive in the form you imagined. And still you continue, not because you have forgotten, but because you have finally remembered that your peace does not depend on anyone else's participation. You think about what hurt you because some part of you still believes it holds a message you have not yet decoded. That if you just examine it from the right angle, in the right light, you will finally see what it was trying to teach you. But the lesson was never hidden. It was written in the first moment of pain, in the first realization that something you trusted could break. The lesson was simply this: you are not immune to suffering. No one is. And the fact that you were hurt does not mean you did something wrong. It means you were human enough to hope, to trust, to love something fragile. And fragile things break. That is not a failure. That is the nature of being alive. Your soul does not pull you back to the pain to punish you. It pulls you back because it is trying to show you something you have been too afraid to see. It is trying to show you that you are still standing, that despite everything, you survived, that the wound did not consume you, even though there were days when you were certain it would. Your mind fixates on the moment of breaking because it cannot believe you are still whole. It searches the past for evidence of your destruction, not realizing that your wholeness is not something you lost. It is something you rebuilt, quietly, in all the moments you did not think anyone was watching. There is a version of healing that does not look like peace. It looks like returning to the same thought, the same memory, over and over, until one day the charge is gone. Until one day you remember what happened and it no longer tightens your chest, no longer
steals your breath, no longer convinces you that you are still living in that moment. This kind of healing is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It simply arrives like morning after a long night you were not sure would end. And when it comes, you will not feel victorious. You will feel quiet. You will feel like someone who walked a long way and finally arrived home. But you are not there yet. You are still in the walking. Still in the part where the mind does not trust the ground beneath your feet. Still in the part where you return to the pain because it is the only thing that feels solid. And I will not tell you to let it go, because you already know you should. What I will tell you is this: the pain is not wrong for being there. You are not weak for returning to it. You are human. And humans, when they are hurt, try to make sense of the hurt. They try to find meaning in the madness, order in the chaos, some reason why it had to happen the way it did. But sometimes there
is no reason. Sometimes the hurt just is. And the only meaning you will find is the meaning you create by choosing what to do with it now that it has passed. There is something the world does not tell you about wounds. It does not tell you that they become familiar, that after enough time, the ache begins to feel like home. You know its contours, you know when it will rise and when it will recede. You know the specific weight of it in your chest at 3 in the morning when sleep will not come. And there is a strange comfort in that knowing, because if nothing else, the pain is yours. It belongs to you in a way that joy sometimes does not. Joy can feel borrowed, temporary, like something you are holding for someone else. But pain settles in. It makes itself known. It does not ask for permission. And so you let it stay. Not because you want it, but because sending it away would mean living in a world where nothing is predictable, where you cannot prepare, where you might be caught off guard by hope. Hope is more dangerous than hurt. Hurt you can manage, hurt you can anticipate, but hope asks you to be vulnerable again, to open the door you bolted shut, to trust that this time might be different. And you are not ready for that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. So you keep the pain close, like a companion you never chose but learned to tolerate. The mind does not know how to let go of what it has not fully understood. And you have been trying to understand your pain the way you would understand a language, a system, a code. You think if you study it long enough, dissect it carefully enough, you will crack it open and find the hidden meaning inside. But pain does not work that way. Pain is not logical. It does not follow rules. It does not care about fairness or justice or whether you deserved it. Pain simply arrives, does what it came to do, and then lingers in the form of memory. And memory, when revisited too often, becomes sharper than the original wound. You remember the hurt more vividly than you remember the healing. You remember the words that cut you more clearly than the words that soothed you. You remember the absence more than the presence. This is not because the hurt was more real. It is because the mind holds on to threat the way the body holds on to heat in winter. It believes that by remembering what harmed you, it can prevent future harm. But all it does is keep you bound to a past that no longer has the power to touch you unless you grant it entry. And then you realize the pain was never chasing you. It was waiting for you to stop running, waiting for you to turn around and face it not as an enemy, but as a part of your story that deserves to be seen, not worshipped, not feared, just seen. Because what you resist grows larger in the dark, and what you acknowledge loses its power to control you. The mind pulls you back because it thinks it is protecting you, but what it is really doing is keeping you tethered to a moment that
no longer exists except in memory. And memory, no matter how vivid, is not the present. It is only an echo. And you have been living inside an echo for so long, you have forgotten what it feels like to stand in the actual light of day. The hurt happened. It mattered. It changed you. But it does not have to be the thing that defines you. You are not only what wounded you, you are also what survived it, what learned from it, what grew around it, like roots finding their way through stone. You are the part of you that kept going even when going felt impossible. You are the part that woke up the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that, even when waking felt like the hardest thing you had ever done. That is not nothing, that is everything. There will come a day when you think of what hurt you and feel only distance, not because you have forgotten, but because you have finally stopped asking it to be anything other than what it was. A moment, a chapter, a storm that passed through your life and left debris, yes, but also left you standing. And in that standing, you will find something the pain could never give you, the knowledge that you are more than what tried to break you. The soul does not keep pulling you back to remind you of your brokenness. It pulls you back to show you how much you have already mended without even realizing it. Every time you returned to the wound and did not fall apart completely, you were healing. Every time you touched the memory and survived the weight of it, you were becoming stronger. Not in the way the world measures strength, but in the way the soul does. Quietly, slowly, in the dark, where no one is watching. You have been your own witness, and that is enough. The soul remembers when the noise finally rests. If these words touch something ancient in you, write, I remember.